Okay, so
Beautiful, thank you.
Okay, I'll call this special select board meeting on January 26, 2022 at 6:01 PM. And before I start in, I'd like to, there be no character accusations against any member of the select board, Patty or Bonnie Batchelor. And if there is, you won't be able to speak. The board, Patty and Bonnie will talk first, and then I will open the meeting up to visitors for questions. Okay. First order of business is select board financial reporting obligations in advance of the town meeting. It may require revisiting the decisions made at the regular select board meeting held on January 18th, 2022, concerning logics and deadlines, and will include an update on the ongoing audit. Okay.
So Louis, if I could ask, if I could just kind of
Yep.
set the stage a little bit.
Yep, go ahead.
Thank you. And then we'll get into the business, but I spent a lot of time doing some research, getting advice and input from our legal contacts at VLCT. And I'm sorry, my dog will stop barking in a moment. But I just wanted to provide some context because this is a confusing area. VLCT is the first to say it, particularly with towns that have opted to do what we did, which is eliminate our elected auditors and switch to an outside auditor because there are two competing sets of obligations. So some of this you all know, but oh, by the way, I drafted a memo from my board colleagues. I posted it on the website. It's under communication, and I also loaded it into the chat. So you're welcome to grab it there. And I'm just going to quickly go through my front page. So last year, as everyone knows, Halifax voted to eliminate the Office of Elected Auditors and replace it with a retained public accounting firm. And separately, Halifax voted to have a retained public accounting firm do a look back, that is to conduct a comprehensive audit of all funds of the town for fiscal year ending 2020. The board opened the bids responsive to the RFP on June 1, and on July 6, we voted to hire Batchelor Associates to conduct both audits, first 2020 and then 2021, and Bonnie Batchelor is with us tonight. These decisions by the voters created a new reporting obligation on the part of the select board. The board now has a statutory obligation to discuss the public accountant's audit report at the first regular meeting after it receives the report. It also has statutory obligations with respect to disseminating the report. The statute sets forth specific requirements concerning the manner in which the public accountant conducts the audit, and the statute identifies specific information that the accountant has to include in the report. All of those obligations can be found at 24 VSA 1690, which is I've included with my memo. A different statute governs the financial information that has to be made available to voters at least 10 days before a town meeting. That's the information that Halifax voters have by custom come to expect in our town report. This is separate and apart from the reporting obligation when a town has hired an outside accountant. The annual reporting obligations are in a different statute, 24 VSA 1682, 83, and 84, and those are also attached to the memo. Hiring an outside accountant does not change the substance. Oh, if people could mute themselves, or you guys will have to mute them. It doesn't change the substance of the annual reporting requirement. It just changes who has to get it done. There are then two distinct but not unrelated reporting requirements. One's triggered by the production of the comprehensive outside audit, and one's triggered by town meeting. Furthermore, the contents of each report is different. To help visualize that difference, VLCT created a chart showing where the annual information can be found in a comprehensive audit report. And the point of that is that it's sort of a subset that has to be made available to the town 10 days before town meeting, a subset of what ultimately ends up in a comprehensive audit report. And VLCT created a chart that's also attached to the memo. Nevertheless, where a town like Halifax has opted for a full audit conducted by a CPA, we can't produce that annual reported information until the accountant is far enough along to be comfortable and confident that the numbers that she extracts are reliable. For reasons I expect Bachelor Bonnie to help us understand, we're not there yet. But it's not unreasonable to think that she will soon be able to extract the annual information from what she's ultimately going to provide, and is then ready to certify it. And just two final points. Regardless of what happens with town meeting, whenever we get the audit report, even if we've satisfied our town meeting reporting obligations, all of the reporting obligations under 1690 will still have to hold a warned meeting, have the CPA explain, disseminate in a particular way. And lastly, just because our annual obligation is a subset of the comprehensive audit, the board can always decide to be more comprehensive in the annual report. That's up to us to decide. But all of this came up last week when we discovered that we had this reporting obligation prior to town meeting. Last week, we decided to hold town meeting on town meeting day. We can't produce those numbers yet. And so now we have to talk about all this. So thank you for that. I'm going to get my dog out for a minute and I'll be listening.
All right. So who wants to be next? Bonnie? Yeah.
I can be. I'm not really sure where to start. Do you have some specific questions that I can kind of target some comments to, or do you just want me to give you an overall of where we're at?
Well, why don't you give an overall where we are now, and then we can ask some questions if we have them.
Okay. So your financial system is on a piece of software called QuickBooks. And QuickBooks is tricky to use in a municipal setting because it's very easy to miss a lot of steps that are necessary in tracking the transactions. And Patty and I have talked about this, and she understands what I'm saying. So that was the first hurdle to get through. So basically what we had to do is we had to take all of the transactions. So when I first looked at QuickBooks in September, I reached out to Patty and I said, you know, we really need to break down all these transactions by fund. Because basically what happens is you guys have one checking account where you hold 100%, well, almost 100% of all of your cash for the town. I have a problem with that, and I've made a recommendation to Patty, and I will make a recommendation as part of my audit. But you have reserve funds and cash from the reserve funds mixed in with your general fund operating. And at a minimum, any reserve funds should really be in a money market or a checking account of their own. So because you have all of your funds in one bank account, what was happening was Patty set up, or Patty's predecessor, the town, whoever set that up, just kind of set up sub cash accounts of this one cash account called equipment reserve. You know, we can go through them: Vermont Emergency Management, cemetery, office equipment, reappraisal, you know, so forth and so on. And what was happening was when Patty was moving money per the budget from the general to the equipment, she was just moving them between those two cash accounts. And really what should be happening is that money coming out of the general fund is an expense to the general fund. And if it's going into the equipment fund, it's revenue in the equipment fund. So that whole step was being missed which means the expenses and the revenue by fund were all understated. So I went back and took all your transactions. I created funds based on, what you had described in the budget and what you had for sub bank accounts, and put all of the transactions for 2020 in the funds as I saw them to be based on how they were posted to the cash accounts, and did all those entries. And since on Monday, I believe, Patty, correct me if I'm wrong, I kind of lose track of days here. Maybe it was Saturday, Monday or Saturday, I sent her the June 30th, 20 reports that were broken down by general fund, all of the capital project funds and special revenue funds, so that you basically have reports right now in your office that break all of the funds down. And Patty, I had asked Patty to go through that to make sure that it was reasonable, because this really should be your representation, not mine, of the accounting. I'm supposed to be auditing it, not really, verifying that these fund balances are correct. So in a few of the discussions and in the emails going back and forth with Patty and I, we've discussed that there's many things going on. Number one, you need to be separating your bank accounts. Number two, you have in your budget, Lynn, I'm just going to use this as an example because we could be here all night if I wanted to go through everything, but you have a $10,000 line item budget for equipment reserve. You're also budgeting, theoretically, all of the equipment expenses in this equipment fund. Really, the equipment expenses outside of the capital and the debt service are really part of your highway fund. And in my opinion, either should be in a highway fund or part of your general operating as a highway department. So I think that not only do you have the problem of you're using one bank account and not all of the proper transactions between the funds are being captured, but you're not really using your reserve accounts as true reserve accounts. If you budget $10,000 or $50,000 or whatever the amount may be per year for a specific purpose, it should be going into that reserve account. And then you should be able to systematically see what you spent out of that account during the year. And then ultimately that account would have its own fund balance. It would have its own due to, due from between all of the general fund and the highway or the reappraisal fund. And none of that is happening or was happening. So Patty started to set up the funds, and I'm hoping that we can get on the same page with our funds as of July 1st, 2021. But that doesn't help me for the 20 and the 21 budget or figures. So I think we've pretty much cleaned up 20. And as soon as I get Patty's feedback, then I can move to 21. And now that we have a system, I think that I could at least get you numbers for your town report within a very short period of time for 21. The audit will not be, audit report will not be done because that's probably going to be a 45 to 50 page report. And I have to do it for 2 separate years. So that won't probably be done in the next week, but I would say, you certainly can have the numbers for town meeting 10 days before town meeting. So, there's a lot of issues in the way that you're tracking your finances. And, I do suggest that maybe you look at the NEMRIC accounting software because that is specifically for municipal accounting. And it does a lot of the background work, all the due to, due froms for you automatically. Whereas, QuickBooks, you have to know municipal accounting and be able to create those entries on your own and know what to do. The other thing that I'm finding is that For example, the equipment fund is showing a deficit of $94,000 in the cash account. That shouldn't be. That either means that your budget numbers aren't working or you're transferring money in and out that isn't balanced. And one discussion that I did have with Patty is there was a $41,000 adjustment in the early part of the fiscal year to bring the equipment fund back to whole. And so my suggestion was, well, you know, did the select board vote on that or aware of that? So, you know, everything that happens, you should be, especially regarding transfers of general fund money, you should be voting on that. So, you know, there's going to be a lot of recommendations and changes that I'm going to suggest in the audit. And I think some of them are necessities versus, you know, should we or shouldn't we? So that's kind of where we are right now. And I feel good about the funds that were set up and the fund balances that we ended up with for 20 and good numbers to go forward into 21, unless Patty, you know, tells me differently.
Oh, no, I think what the reports that you sent were good from what I could see. For 20.
Okay. So what's going to happen is I'm going to have to do adjustments in your QuickBooks for all of my adjustments for 20, and then I'm going to have to do the exact same exercise for 21. But now that we have a structure, now that Patty and I have talked, I think that piece should move along quickly so I can at least generate these same reports for you for the town meeting. But you have to realize you absolutely cannot represent these numbers as audited until I release my audited report. These are just reconciled numbers that will be fairly close to the audited numbers when they're done, but you cannot put them out as audited numbers because they won't be until I sign a report. So I just want to make that
She's
perfectly
good.
clear.
What?
I think she's done a good job.
Meryl, so I recognize that voice, but if you could mute yourself.
Sorry, I thought I was.
That's all right. No, it's a wonderful comment though. I just actually want to jump in to just based on my conversations with BLCT, and Bonnie, correct me if I'm wrong. When you're saying they're not audited, you're meaning they're not audited numbers with a capital A, and what we've always, the requirements for the town report have always been audited with a little a, right? That it's sort of that when our elected auditors have reviewed the accounts, they've been doing a little a audit, you know, sort of this is what we believe all the numbers are, and you'd be producing exactly the same thing as our former elected auditors would have been performing for that purpose. Is that right?
Well, no, so this is kind of hard to describe. I'm your auditor. I'm not your town accountant that can come in and do journal entries and make decisions about how things should be. Okay, that is your town accountant's job. That's why she has to look at these numbers and be 100%, well, as close to 100% as she would be if she created them, to put in the town report as your representation of these numbers. I cannot bless or anything these numbers until I am done with the audit. You cannot say the auditor produced these numbers because these are your representations. Mm-hmm. Okay. So, and you know, I know that I've had this discussion with many people. I am not an advocate of town auditors. And this is no offense to any town auditor that's out there or listening, but the word auditor is extremely misleading. Town people, when they hear town auditors, they think, and not everybody, but it is very common that people think you're having an audit. and you're not. It's just that you're taking the numbers that the town accountant or treasurer gives you and you're making sure they seem reasonable, but it is in no way, shape, or form even close to an audit of what has to be done. And when you get my numbers, you're going to see things that you don't see in the normal course of the records. You're going to see delinquent receivables, delinquent interests. You're going to see deferred taxes, because any town or municipality is on a modified accrual basis, which means you can include, we have to include our property tax receivable and our interest and penalty receivable, but we have to then back out anything you haven't received in the first 60 days of your new year. So anything that wasn't received as of August 31st, we show as a deferral. And then there's a whole separate set of financials. In a municipality, you don't show long-term debt, you don't show capital assets, you don't show accrued vacation, because those are all long-term items that do not come within the first 60-day window of a fiscal year. So we are required to not only present a set of financial statements that agree with your record, but then we have to convert those financial statements and show long-term debt, fixed assets, accrued vacation, your pension liability based on the GASB 68 rules for showing deferred outflows and inflows. So you're going to see a lot of things in these financial statements that you don't recognize. And then I will have a reconciliation in there so that you will be able to take what's in your books and see how I get to this other set of financial statements. So I guess, I mean, that's a really long explanation, but what I want you to understand is if I tell you the numbers on these reports are close to what the audit's going to be, so that you can represent to the town the way the books are, you cannot in any way, shape, or form use that this is audited by us, because it's not audited by us until you receive the audit signed report.
So how long would it take you to get it? 30 days, 60 days?
What, to get an audit? To for what?
Get the full audit.
Oh, I would say if I can move along on 21, no more than 30 days for sure. But you can still, I mean, you can still take the numbers that Patty blesses from, you know, this allocation of funds and publish that for town meeting, so that you don't have to change the town meeting day. All I'm saying is it can't be as if it was represented from me. It has to be blessed and reviewed by Patty or by someone in the town, which we should be the treasurer, that these numbers are reasonable and going into the town report or part of town meeting. That's the distinction, if that makes
If
sense.
we,
Yeah.
if we voted to postpone the town meeting until May, you'd probably, you said you'd have the figures by
Oh, yeah.
April.
Oh, definitely.
Well, question I have is, so my understanding of, I think it was 24 BSA 1690, right? The requirement for town meeting is that we needed to present audited financials to the town 10 days before the town meeting. So it sounds like that's not happening, right? Because I mean, you're not providing that, right? And is Patty providing that? I guess the question is, are we meeting that requirement if, you know, with the numbers that we have available?
Actually, I want to let Bonnie, but I do think this is the piece that I do understand better, Pete. 1690 refers to the full audit, and whether Bonnie gave it to us on February 1, March 1, December 1, we'd have then a requirement to warn, to disseminate that, to discuss it at our next regularly scheduled meeting. The annual audited information, annual report with sort of a small a, that's an annual requirement that doesn't actually, that's separate from, Sue, can you mute yourself? Or that's separate, that doesn't actually require the full audit. We can
Okay, I'm sorry.
decide, so we can
So-
decide to delay until we have the full audit, but we can also, what Bonnie is saying is she can extract the kind of information that if Patty's comfortable with it and we're comfortable with it, would satisfy our statutory obligations in advance of town meeting. And then sometime shortly after that, we'd get the full audit and we'd go through that warned meeting and discussion and dissemination.
Okay, so I
So,
think I quoted the wrong number there, right? Because in my notes here, it says, I think for the annual one, it was 1682, 83, 84.
right.
That's the reference for the, so I thought that required, audited financials to meet that requirement. It does it not require audited financials for 1682, 83, 84?
But not audited in the way that, an outside accountant does it. It's audited, sort of reviewed and certified by the town, consistent
Okay,
with
so-
what
so-
our elected auditors have done in the past.
Let me ask it in a different way. Is the information that's provided, that will be provided by Bonnie to Patty and reviewed by Patty, does that meet the statutory requirement for the town meeting?
Yes. It's a smaller subset with less sort of as Bonnie was saying, it's not got that sort of lockbox around it with all the certifications, and it's sort of reliable to a responsible degree, that Patty's putting her name on it, that the board is putting our name on it, and then yeah.
Okay, so and Bonnie, you agree, that's where you were going with that. We can get the statutorily required numbers from the information you're providing to Patty to meet that requirement. We're okay with that.
Yes, you are.
Patty, are you okay with that?
Yes, that is fine, but I don't know that Bonnie will be able to get FY21 to us in time for the
That's
printer in
what I
order to
mean.
have it inside the book.
Because it's gotta be,
Right, well, that's the question.
That's the
right?
next question.
Right, that's, when do we need it in order to get it in the book? Right?
1st of February, but no later than that.
Right, so it would have to go to be printed by somewhere between the 1st and the 5th of February in order to be able to get it back in time for 10 days before town
All right, so
meeting.
let's say the 1st of February.
Right, so you may need to, which is only a week away, so you may
Less than
need
a week.
to postpone town meeting for a little while. Could be May. And then you'd be assured that Bonnie would be able to get at least this portion of the audit for the town book.
So Bonnie, when would we have that information that's required for the town meeting available?
I would not by early next week. I would say probably within a couple weeks at the most, but my question is, why couldn't you publish it as a supplement and have it available 10 days before town meeting? Why did you mean, is it an option not to have it in the book?
Possible. It's fine to do that. The school did it once, I think.
The input I got from VLCT on that is that it's sort of Halifax custom is to produce all of that in the town report. It by statute doesn't have to be made available until 10 days before town meeting. But there's, especially where there's concerns about the still open audits, that I think it would be enormously helpful if we were able to have it all together. And just Patty, you know something more about the printing. Is it just that the printers have so many books that they're producing that it takes so long?
in addition to printing other towns' books as well, they require, I believe, if I'm wrong, I believe they require to have it for 10 days in order to get it completely printed.
Mhm.
That is if we send it out to an outside printer. Sarah Barnett and I did toy around with the idea of possibly printing the town report this year in-house, to save a little and for timely purposes. We could get some volunteers to help collate that.
Oh, because we have all that donated paper.
Right, so we were thinking maybe this particular year, we would give that a try, print it in-house and see how that went.
Hmm.
But that still doesn't buy you a whole lot of time. 10 days before town meeting is only February 19th.
And Bonnie, just so we exhaust this possibility, what's the first date, what is the date that you could confidently say that if we went this route, that you could have that information to us?
You mean just the town report information? I
Yeah.
would, the 19th I could do. Assuming that Patty can keep feeding me the information I need, like with, she was really great this week and getting me stuff like immediately. So the problem is that, you're working on a project, right? And you get to a point where you can't do anything else. So you can't just sit there and wait, right, for your information to come to you. So you put it down and you start another project and you finish that project out and then you go back. So, if Patty and I could come up with, say, okay, I'm going to work on it Friday and Saturday. I work Saturdays, but I'm sure Patty doesn't, or I'm going to work on it Friday and Tuesday or Monday. Can you be like right there at my beck and call to get me information that I need? Then I could, say, yes, we can get this done by this amount of time, by this date. I mean, ultimately, my druthers would be that I get to finish the audit and issue the report for you, because with that will come a management letter with all the recommendations, any findings that I have, absolutely 100% reconcile balances. I mean, that would be my ultimate, if you said, how do you want to approach this? That's what I would tell you. But if you don't want to wait that amount of time, which I would say probably is no more than 30 days, then, then this is the next best thing.
We're already talking about moving town meeting to May,
That's right.
which is no one really seemed to object to. We just prefer to get it done sooner. But why don't we just wait to May and have the full audit and
That's right.
everything?
The issue with the May meeting was we were talking about doing it in person, right? And then
Well,
that caused some heartburn.
you all decided to go with a vote, so
Yeah.
do that, but do it in May.
You can still do the Australian ballot
Yeah.
for the whole warning and everything.
And just put it off.
Just do it in May.
Just do it in May.
Right.
Seems like a reasonable compromise.
Well, we got a little time to
Yeah.
see how things are, another month or two.
Well, do we need to decide now that we're not going to do town meeting in March?
On the
though,
first,
correct?
right.
So should I make a motion
Yeah, yeah.
that we reschedule town meeting? We looked at the dates.
May 21st.
So May 21st was a Saturday for the Australian ballot.
But you wouldn't have to split them. The whole reason we had said the May 21st was if
Oh, to
you
do the
wanted
in-person.
to do the two, but if you do the Australian ballot for both the election of officers and
Yeah.
the budget questions, the warning questions, you would do it on, you could do it on a Tuesday, just because it would just be voting.
Do you get better turnout on Tuesday or Saturday?
Well, voting would be Tuesday.
Everyone's used to Tuesday. That's the only reason I was thinking Tuesday.
So I move we do it May 24th, Tuesday, May 24th.
Okay.
Do
Motion
we
made,
have, sorry. No, go ahead.
motion made, and I'll second to have it May 24th for the town meeting, Australian ballot. Any questions? Karen?
Yeah, I'm just wondering, worst case scenario and our budget got voted down. That gives us very little time to regroup. I'm just wondering about having a little bit more of a cushion. Is there any reason not to, like, do we have to push it to that late in May? That's
May
my only
3rd?
question. And I don't remember
Beginning?
go ahead.
I'm happy to amend it to motion to May 3rd, beginning
April
of the month.
26th.
I mean, it sounds like we're gonna be good either way. At that point, we should be good with the audit, or, so,
So if I could interject, if Bonnie only needs, say she needs
Yeah.
45 days, giving an extra 15 at 45 days, that gets us to the middle of March. Say the end of March, if she runs into snags or something, say the end of March, she's completely done with her both years, 50 pages of each one. Then you can have time to warn your select board meeting to review the data, say on the first Tuesday of April.
April?
Yeah, April, and then, yeah, if you could then do town meeting March 3rd. May 3rd, sorry.
So we wouldn't have to do it. Early April, wouldn't it?
Early April.
Whoever is 7635, could you mute yourself, please?
or if we did it April 4th, give a little cushion on either side.
So what's, I mean, she's saying May 3rd.
You're saying
Yeah, May 3rd.
But then- Oh, there's someone who has a lot of static. Can you mute, please? Thank you.
Or you could do the last week of April. I don't know when school vacations are.
Last week of April. So how about May 3rd? I'll make my motion that.
Okay, and I'll second that.
How do you feel about that?
Well, I was just gonna say that, I don't want to speak for the school board, but the school board did discuss at one of our meetings of depending if the board wanted to do an in-person meeting, that although the school is closed to visitors, the school board would certainly entertain having the multi-purpose room open to have a meeting. And then we would just have to do a special disinfection. beforehand.
That ship is, I think we've already made that decision. But somebody can, oh, shoot. I think you guys are going to have to mute the folks on the phone. I don't have any host controls.
I'm sorry, I was not done talking and I got interrupted.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Yeah. Thanks. So I just kind of wanted to because that's an option. I know you guys have already talked about that, but you're also moving the date, so there could be other options on the table. I just wanted to throw that out.
Okay,
Thank you.
all right, any,
Edie has her hands up.
Hi, everybody. I just wanted to make the point that the town does have an obligation for this audit, and it is hugely important to the town. But the town has other business to take care of as well. And to my line of thinking, the earlier that the elections can be held and that the new board can be put into place, the better it is for the towns, for the select board to really begin to function as a team and be able to address big issues like, are there things we need to be doing a little bit differently from a financial perspective, and how do we approach any of those things, working obviously in conjunction with the town treasurer. But it does feel to me like having it as early as possible allows things to begin to gel for that new board and to begin to kind of get some traction again, to manage the affairs of the town. So that's my perspective, is that's not the only function that the board has. And I think it's beneficial to kind of get this wrapped up and get it before the voters so that the voters can speak as soon as possible. Thank you.
Well, what Bonnie saying? A month?
Yeah, I think that May 3rd was, I think we had built in a couple of extra weeks beyond what Bonnie was asking for, right, to make sure that so we don't have to go through this again.
Right,
To make sure that we had the audit complete and that, then, and then we can warn a meeting and we can do all that, all of our select board stuff and get all our ducks in a row prior to town meeting. So we don't have to do this again. That's my concern. So Edie, I guess my response to that is I think the May 3rd is pretty much within a couple of weeks, the earliest possible, right, that we can do and have the audit complete.
right, because we're gonna have to have it the very first part of April to post a warning.
Right.
Right. And Bonnie, you haven't, just to confirm, Bonnie, these dates work for you
Yes.
that we're talking about? Great.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I assuming that Patty can be on getting me information quickly and I don't have to put it down for a month or so. Yes, absolutely.
Oh, Doug and
just said-
Mary Lou have their hands up.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, hi, this is Mary Lou Parkhurst. Question, is this a in-person meeting or is it just for the voting?
Oh, this is Australian ballot.
Right, but the town meeting that you want to move into May, is that an in-person?
Australian
town meeting?
ballot. Australian ballot.
It's not in
Yeah.
person, it's by ballot. There will be an
okay.
informational meeting within 10 days prior,
Right, have to be.
as usual. That would be in person with remote access.
So it's all Australian ballot?
Correct.
Right.
That was
Mary Lou,
decided that at the last select board meeting.
Do you have something more, Paul? No, okay.
What were you gonna say, Karen?
oh, just that, yeah, we just changed the date, not the method.
Okay, all right, that was my question. All right, thank you.
Okay, any more questions? On the motion? Not ready for the question? All those in favor say aye.
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 4-0. So passed. So we-
I think, do we need to set, I'm sorry, I'm just, do we need to reset the other deadlines that had been triggered by the March 1 deadline? Patty, that's kind of for you.
Right, correct, that, there will be another date for submission of articles to the warning is not due yet. There will be another date for submission for petitions for people to run for office, the whole thing resets. I will publish that with the new dates.
Thanks.
I just have a
Right.
question. If it's hearing for visitors
Yeah.
is open. So now that town meeting kind of got pushed off a little bit, is the select board going to be appointing somebody in Earl's absence?
Hopefully in next meeting.
We have posted the vacancy and we said we'd interview at the next
Yeah,
meeting.
yeah, we posted it
Oh, okay.
and we've got one at least that's applied.
We-
Where's that posted? Is it on the website?
Yeah,
Okay. Must
and
have-
we had it posted in the 3 public places here and post office and
Cool, thank you.
Chris has his hand up.
who's that?
Chris Parkins has
Oh,
his hand
Chris.
up.
Go ahead, Chris.
Good evening. Good evening. I was just curious, if kind of going back to the $94,000 deficit in the equipment line item, is that something, Bonnie, that you're going to be able to track down and eventually come to some kind of conclusion about what's going on there, or is that going to be the responsibility of the town?
I would say a combination thereof. I mean, I know now, I already know what's going on. It's just, and it goes back to, I don't know at what point you came into the meeting, but to my original kind of synopsis of how you're using you have one cash account that you're using for all your general operations and your reserve account. And so money is just going back and forth between funds without all of the proper entries. And so it's just not being used correctly, in my estimation, of how you should be using an equipment reserve account. So, I mean, really what's happening is expenses are being charged to that fund that really probably should be in general fund operations, basically.
Okay, yeah, I did come in a
But
little bit
yes,
late. So
I
apologize.
will, it'll all be in my management letter.
Right. I assume in your report, you'll offer some recommendations on how we can straighten that out and do it a little better.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Bonnie, if I could ask a general question. So, I mean, you're making a lot of suggestions, and recommendations in terms of sort of how we do this accounting. Are these coming from a standard, like some kind of general accepted accounting practices or municipal accounting practices, or where, how do you formulate these suggestions?
Well, experience. I've been doing this for many, many years. I've been working with towns for many, many years. But also generally accepted accounting principles. I mean, when you just think about it, as simplest terms as possible. The town votes in a budget to put $10,000 in an equipment reserve. To most people, or a lot of townspeople, what that means is you have an equipment reserve fund that you're building a reserve for to meet your capital plan obligation, say in a 5-year or 10-year plan. The way you're using it is you're putting money in from general operations, and you're paying purchases of new equipment, you're paying capital debt, you're paying operating expenses, and you're spending more than you're transferring in from the general fund. So it's not really being used in the manner that reserve accounts should be used. So, so it's a combination of experience in working with towns. It's a combination of generally accepted accounting principles. It's a combination of just accounting processes. Right now, all you're doing is you've got one bank account, right? But you're just doing a paper entry that's moving it from this account in QuickBooks called general checking to a sub account within the same cash account to equipment reserve. You're not capturing revenue, you're not capturing expenses, you're not capturing due to, due froms when monies are crossing funds. Those are all totally contrary to generally accepted accounting principles.
Okay, that's really what I was getting at, right? I mean, so the suggestions that you're making and these recommendations are all in keeping with generally accepted accounting principles or practices.
Correct.
Is that okay? That's okay. Paul, I think Paul's got something.
Yeah, I just had a question. So I think, at least in my experience with working with the budgets, and it's not the town, but the school, is there's a difference between having a article on your warning that says, shall the town create a reserve fund? And then shall the town fund that reserve fund with $50,000? Because then year after year after year, you can keep that $50,000 in there and you can keep adding to it, and it doesn't go back to your general fund at the end of the year. But if you just have your line items on your budget, and line item 20,021 is your equipment fund, and you put 100,000, and you, the select board, put $100,000 into that equipment fund, and that's different than having a quote unquote reserve fund that's separately funded. And it almost sounds like there's two different things being spoken about here.
Yeah, you're exactly correct. I totally agree with you. And that's what I'm saying. When you look at your budget, when you look at the town's budget, there is one specific line in the budget that says equipment reserve. To me, that means that is a segregated pool of money, a reserve that is going to build. And then you have all these equipment expenses.
But that's not the case, is it? That's
Yes,
just a
it is.
line called reserve. No, I'm sorry, I'm asking the select board.
Oh,
Is that actually an equipment reserve fund special account, or is that just the line item that happens to be named equipment reserve?
Line item.
It's just a line item.
Yeah.
So there might be some misunderstanding of the name of what it's given in QuickBooks or whatever it's called on the actual GL.
Probably.
Okay,
so I mean, that's a good point, because in speaking with Patty, I gleaned from the conversation that there should be an equipment reserve. And then there are equipment expenses that are really probably general fund expenses as part of DPW or highway. So, you know, that's something we absolutely need to clarify. And my question would be, what is the expectation of the town voters? Are they voting on that budget, seeing that line in equipment reserve, thinking that money is being set aside in equipment reserve? Or are you just funding that as part of your general operations to run your highway equipment? That would be my question.
as the moderator, a town municipality, the voters can vote and mix any one line item on a budget.
Yeah.
But if it's part of if it's part of your base budget, then that's part of your general budget. It would have to be a separate article that the voters would vote on separately for that, and that wouldn't be part of your regular budget. It would be its own article, its own piece.
I do agree with you, but I don't know if that is what the towns, because that being said, there should be no separate pools of money because everything was put in there as a general budget. So that means you have no other funds, you have no reappraiser fund or anything. You just have a general fund, period. And all of those funds are just within general operations. And I don't think that's accurate. Do you agree with Patty?
Well, there are separate funds because we have to keep monies aside for, say, the reappraisal project that we get from the state every year. So the money that we get from the state gets put into the reappraisal fund, for example, and it is just set there so we know, and it builds year after year after year until we have a reappraisal. It's we cannot put for example, the reappraisal funds into the general fund because it is specific for like a reappraisal, for example.
Right. And so the way I've segregated or suggested is that you have, based on the sub accounts that Patty has used, and so this is an absolutely important question that has to be answered without any variation, is that that's why, Patty, you need to look at those reports, because we have general fund, then we have what's called special revenue funds, which are your reappraisal funds, your Vermont emergency management, cemetery, municipal planning grant, cemetery, record restoration, Scott and Eames, and the celebration account. Are those special revenue accounts that have to be segregated from the general fund checking? And then we have capital project funds, which are the resurfacing fund, bridge fund, new town garage fund, and equipment fund. And are those in fact valid funds that you are segregating funds in? So if that is not accurate, then we have to go back to the drawing board, because I cannot finish 20 and go into 21 until we have those pools of money correct.
In my opinion, those are all special funds that the monies in those funds are not to be used for anything outside of what is in those funds.
Okay. Okay.
Can I a question of my own and then one that's in the chat. Bonnie, you started out, I think I understood you to be saying that QuickBooks, that particular software sort of, that might be, that it might not be optimal for this, or that may be part of the source of some of the teasing apart that you're trying to do. Is that, I mean, is QuickBooks regularly used for municipal accounting? Is that, do you have a recommendation on that?
Yeah,
And
no, I mean, it's QuickBooks can be used for municipal accounting for a very small town, as long as you are very fluid in doing municipal entries. There are pieces of software out there widely in New England is Nemrick. And it is a municipal accounting software. And what that software does is it does all of the fund reporting for you. Each fund has its own set of account numbers. If you cross funds, in other words, if you pay an expense for the equipment fund out of the general fund, it creates a due to, due from, which is part of the outcome of this allocation that I've done, is creating these due to, due froms. But QuickBooks, if you know municipal accounting, if you know the entries to make, and if you know QuickBooks and set up the funds as classes, you can use it. It does lead for potential errors if you miss a step or if you forget to do something, but you can use it, but you have to know municipal accounting and you have to know QuickBooks in order for it to work. So, that's a judgment call from Patty on how comfortable she feels with it. And if not, then I would suggest looking at some municipal software.
So is this part of your report, right? These kind of suggestions, in terms of sort of how we do things, will that be included?
Yeah, so what you're going to get is you're going to get two things. You're going to get four, because you're going to get it for 2 years, but you will have an audited report. And if I find things or I have things that I feel are findings, a lack of internal controls, or maybe not something that's generally accepted accounting principles, I'll have findings that are published as part of your audit report that you can respond to and make part of the audit report. The second thing I will have is a management letter, which will be much more detailed as far as suggestions. The suggestions will not be part of the audit. It will be a separate management letter that is identified in the audit, so you know that it's out there and to ask for it, but they will be delivered together.
And I
Okay.
just want to, Mary Brewster asked a question a while ago. Mary, I'm going to because I think it's a question that other people have had, which is, why has it taken this long to come to this point? I think that's sort of one of the things that kind of led to tonight's meeting. I think it is a question that folks have.
Yeah, no, it's a valid question. I think there's a few reasons. This was a lot of work to be able to try to unravel a year's worth of transactions and figure out the funds and allocate them and try to make sense of it. But also, we started getting information late August, and information came, there was a disruption because I know that there were personal things going on in the town. And I finally got the last bit of information in an email on December 3rd. But by that time, I'd already started in other projects, and exactly, what I described before. I had to finish the projects I was on then before I could get back to this. So, if we have, like what I do with clients that have been my clients, I start probably in May for June year ends, and we start testing and doing all the audit memos and the engagement letters. And as soon as they're ready and want to get on my calendar, then I block out a week of time. We get the audit done, and usually drafts are done. Fieldwork drafts are done within a month's time. But when I don't get information so that I can work on it, I have to put it aside and start something else. And that's, pretty much what happened.
Thanks.
Yep.
And just, Louis, I know Bob Turi had his hand up, but he wasn't able to put it up. So whenever you're ready to recognize him.
Okay, Bob.
Yes, thank you. And I'm sorry, this is my daughter's laptop, Addie. So the questions for Bonnie. Thanks for all your hard work. This is kind of a, as part of your audit, because I don't know the details, you know, because I know there's a whole nother layer of details that you know, in terms of things that you do and think about. Have you looked at our checking account, you know, because that's where all the most revenue goes into, and most, you know, we pay for most things by checks, I would assume. Have you looked at all of those copies of all of those checks and you understand all the vendors that have been paid out this year?
Well, you have to understand what an audit is before I answer that question. You know, I'm not doing a forensic audit, I'm doing an
Correct.
annual
Okay.
audit, okay?
Got it.
If I was doing a forensic audit, I would be looking at probably 95% of the checks and the vendors. As an auditor, you pick a test sample and you sample it. And if you don't find anything within your level of materiality that is grossly misstated or out of whack with internal control, then you pick a test, you pick a sample. But I will say, because of having to pick apart the transactions in QuickBooks, I have had to look at quite a bit. So not normally done in an annual audit, but because of the way we had to do it, we had to look at quite a bit.
Great. Thanks a lot. Thanks.
Yep.
Any other questions? Paul,
If nobody else has one, I have another one.
I don't see anybody there.
Okay, so there's the last audit from not our town auditors would have been back after Irene, right? So when the town had that last audit, why the huge, I'm gonna assume, bad word, but I'm gonna assume that the accounting practices haven't changed from then to now. So why the huge swing? Has anybody looked at that audit and those findings? Because personally, I haven't. And to find out why we're hearing such a huge, it sounds like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, when we had one and these kind of things didn't come up. And I'm not an auditor and I didn't stay at a Holiday Inn Express last night, but so I'm just, I mean, I don't know, but it just seems, that strikes me odd. That's all.
Yeah, I have a good answer for that.
I don't know either. I know that the other auditors back in 2012, I think it was,
Or 13.
or 13, they were here in the office for a week. They had full access to QuickBooks. They had full access to all the files. Their audit findings were taken, and there were updates and changes made based on their audit findings and recommendations. But they did not have any issues with the way that the books were handled, and they've been continued the same way since then.
I obviously can't answer that question, but I was thinking about something like that. And I guess what I would say from my perspective, both as a resident and as a member of the board, the fact that if I'm sure that they did a good job then, I'm sure that Bonnie's doing a good job now, but if you have two different measurement systems, I was thinking like inches and metric system. I don't remember what the word is for the inches, but if both are valid, both are reliable, and there's a really easy way to convert from one measuring system to another. And so whatever it was that I think it was Sullivan and Powers did 10 years ago, if everything was fine, then even if Bonnie's sort of thinking at it from a different perspective or in terms of different practices, it should be pretty simple to do the conversion and test things that way. And I welcome whatever her findings are. I don't think I wouldn't be inclined to think that just because they green-lighted everything then, and if Bonnie raises questions, that we shouldn't really be paying attention to those questions.
Wasn't my intention at all, but thank you.
Yeah, I mean, and please let me say right here now that my suggestions relate only to generally accepted accounting principles. I do not feel or have not found any instance of any improprietary anything. So that is not where I am coming from at all. My only suggestions and my findings relate to how the transactions are posted in QuickBooks and how the numbers are being presented within each fund. So it is clearly and absolutely just suggestions on proper recording of entries and maybe or definitely some suggestions on what the board should be aware of and voting on, that things shouldn't just be done in QuickBooks without the select board's vote and awareness of things. But other than that, it's based on suggestions for the accounting structure.
Edie,
Are we still operating on a cash basis?
Yes.
The QuickBooks is on a cash basis, but the audit will be on a modified accrual basis.
Okay, that was one recommendation that I recall from the audits after Tropical Storm Irene, and it was also something that was brought up in VLCT training on finances when I was on the select board back in the day. And it was something that VLCT had a financial specialist, I don't know whether he's still there, who would offer to help a town switch off of a cash basis. So it's just something to think about in the future. I do know that there were some internal controls that Patty put into place during the time I was on the select board, again, just trying to be more aligned with the internal controls that were suggested by VLCT. And I can't remember the specifics of those, but I do want to state my recollection as a sort of a big change recommendation from those other audits was to move off of a cash basis, but it is not simple per Kara's, metric versus SI or imperial changes, right? So anyway, just a little bit of history for folks.
Yeah, and I will say when we finish, Patty's books will agree with the audit, and the audit will be on an accrual basis. So you'll see delinquent tax receivables, interest penalty receivables. You'll see accounts payable. If there's any other receivables that need to be. So the entries that I give her, and as part of my audit process, is I give the journal entries to the town, have them make all the adjustments, and then send me back so I know that their books agree with the audit. So in the following year, you're starting in a good place.
any other questions? If there isn't, I want to thank Bonnie for coming, for being on here.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Bonnie.
Very good.
Very welcome.
And thanks to Patty for supporting us through this very
Yeah.
much.
Yeah.
Okay.
You're welcome.
I'll move adjourn.
All right, motion made and second to adjourn. All those in favor say aye.
Hi,
All right.
So passed. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
terrific.
Good night.
Thanks a lot. If somebody could shut down the recording, and we'll
Working on
move
it.
forward from there. Great,
He's
thank
working
you.
on it.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yep, take care, Chris.